Welcome to our session. We're waiting just a few minutes just because this is the first session and people are kind of getting oriented to the Hop-In platform. So we're going to wait just another couple minutes to make sure that if people are still finding their way in, they can do that. There's a link at the bottom of the screen, the bit.ly, which has an organizer for our presentation and has the link to the slide deck and some additional information as well. So feel free to do that. And then Shauna, actually, my co-pilot, also put a link in the chat. And we will be using chat today, so please make sure that that chat window is open on the right-hand side. And as people are coming in, it'd be great to hear what you do and where you do it, just to kind of get a sense of who's in the room. Looks like we've got about 21 people, which is great. So please share where you are, and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. And Teresa, thank you for being the brave one to be the first chatter on our session. That's awesome. Thank you. All right, Shauna, do you think we should go ahead and get started? All right, let's make it happen. So as people are coming in, great to have you. We are going to, I am new to Hop-In, so hopefully I'm going to be able to do this correctly. Let's see if that worked here. I just advanced the slide, and I'm just going to check and make sure that you're seeing the same thing. Oh, great, it's working. Yay. All right, so just some quick introductions. My name is Mark Ray. I am a 27-year educator. I worked as a teacher librarian for 20 years and was a district leader in Vancouver Public Schools for 7. I am now a free-range educator working with a number of projects, both across the United States and here in Washington State. We'll be kind of talking a little bit about a project that we worked together over this last school year. And Shauna, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Shauna Ferguson. I'm the high school teacher librarian in Vancouver, Washington for Columbia River, and have been fortunate to work with Mark on a number of projects. And he and Hillary Marshall invited me to join them on the TeachKit this past school year. So it's exciting to be here to just support Mark and his work, and also to support you guys with the chat and the Q&A.
And Shauna's underselling herself. Shauna is a brilliant teacher librarian and a colleague. So that's really just amazing stuff. And it's just been a wonderful opportunity to collaborate with her. So I really appreciate Shauna being here today. So our agenda, our topics that we'd like to focus on is to look at this idea of instructional partnership. As a former district leader and a instructional coach, I'm really fascinated by this idea of instructional partnership, and I really think that's an opportunity that schools are kind of underutilizing. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that today. Also kind of try to get a snapshot of some of the needs of educators and students when it comes to instructional technology. And then we're going to introduce you to something that we created collaboratively over this last school year, the Washington TeachKit, as a tool that could be used either for professional development or also as an opportunity for some instructional partnership. So first of all, I want to start off with a chat question. So just kind of post this into the chat. So as you look back on the last year, what are some things that worked for you in supporting digital learning and teaching in your schools or in your districts? Let's take a look and see kind of what worked. What were some successes that might have come out of this last year? We're going to take a look and see what people, just go ahead and post that in the chat of things that worked for you. And I'm looking at the chat here just to see what people are sharing. So I'm seeing there's a Shannon Miller. It's funny because I work with a Shannon Miller at the national level. So for a minute I thought, oh my gosh, she's crashed my session, but it's a different Shannon Miller. So welcome, Shannon. Yeah, so Christy has a good point. Opportunity for students to teach one another and support one another, not just listen to the teacher. So really an opportunity to kind of have some more voice and choice and agency. That was a success. So Eric commenting about some flexibility that existed, keeping it simple, trying to distill it down to the most essential pieces, and then certainly this challenge of engagement. That's something that we struggled with as we built this thing that we're going to share with you today. Patience, wait time, and wait even some more. Yeah, PLCs. So that's great. That kind of actually gets kind of the juices flowing and talking a little bit about this idea of informal collaboration. So the next chat question is great. So we had maybe some success, some lessons learned. So now what would you like to do differently, or what are you going to need to do differently as you look to this next year? Obviously, there's going to be some changes in how instruction looks and how that functions, whether it's in the classroom or in some hybrid mode. So what are some things that you might have to do differently? So let's kind of share those in the chat. Next, please. I'm looking at the chat responses here. So Susan posted bringing parents on board as partners. That's probably both something that may have happened before, but it's also something that I think probably as we look at the coming year, we still need to do that. So I think that that's something that kind of works for both of those responses. Yeah, another one. Dan is plus oneing this idea of family communication. Certainly, that's one of the things that occurred, is that it kind of expanded the partnership of supporting student learners beyond just the school and the classroom, and really really put a lot of it at the feet of families and caregivers and parents. So Sandy shared fundamental technology and problem-solving skills. Yeah, Shauna kind of plus oneing what Sandy said. So Brenda, I'm going to have our technical support person maybe try to help you with your question here that you can't hear or see anything, because I think everybody else is able to hear and see since they are responding to us. So hopefully he is still on board and can help you with that. All right, so now I'm going to ask you to take a survey, and it's just going to be a short survey, don't worry, and unfortunately there's no prize, there's no gift card after you complete the survey, but we want to kind of get a sense of what is in place in your own system, whether it's a school and or district, and some of the kind of the current state of what digital learning looks like in your home setting. So there's a link on the slide, and it's bit.ly hashtag capital T teach, capital K kit, numeral 1. And if you're in the slide deck, you can also click on that link and it should take you to the poll. And I'm going to go ahead and give you about 5 minutes or so to take that poll. It's going to give us a sense of kind of what's happening in your system and the ability to kind of compare that with the experiences of other people that are in the session this morning. So if there's any questions, go ahead and put it on the post. We'll go ahead and I think Shauna will go ahead and put that link in the, hopefully she can put that into the chat as well. Take a few minutes. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to take that poll. And when you're done with the poll, go ahead and leave that window up because it's set so that you can actually see the results of other people as they're taking the poll. So if there's any questions, put them in chat. Otherwise, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to go ahead and take this short survey. So I'm going to do it. So we've got about 9 people in, which is probably about half the people that are in the room, and we'll just kind of keep looking at this. Some things may change as we go. Looking at the first question, which is which of the following currently support digital learning and teaching in your school or system? So it looks like there's a pretty good there's a lot of supports and scaffolds in place. See that there's some classes, a lot of training guides, a lot of kind of just traditional professional development opportunities, slightly smaller number of instructional coaches or trainers. It's good to see as teacher librarians, we've got some teacher librarians that are providing some support. And yeah, so it looks like there's like a lot of content has been created, but maybe there's not a lot of face-to-face or ongoing support in place. In the rating of educator confidence in using educational technologies for the coming school year, feeling reasonably good. That's great. That looks like the majority of people are giving it a 3, which is a pretty high score. Using the SAMR model, this is, some of you may be familiar with this, so the definitions kind of plugged it in there for you so you knew what those were. And it looks to me like, you know, there's a pretty high level of kind of in the middle of the SAMR model, which is modification and augmentation. The majority of people are kind of in that space. So that's good news. It sounds to me like just as an ed tech person, that seems like that's a good grade, I guess, in terms of where you are. Looking at some specific needs that educators have as the new school year begins. How to hold on to some of the things that we need to help students access core and provide flexibility. Yeah, so really kind of trying to figure out what worked and try to keep those things front of mind and keep those going as we move forward. Bringing parents on board, great. Yeah, authentic interactions and some authentic instruction that's going on. Great. Okay, and then let's look and see. Yeah, so this is good. So this might be hopefully this is going to be helpful in many ways. But we'll talk just briefly about later on in the presentation about the Washington State Educational Technology Standards, because it looks to me like 50% actually. Little or no knowledge by most educators of the ed tech standards. So hopefully that's a great takeaway that you'll have for today. And just looking at the last question, which categories or digital tools or services are the highest priorities for educators? Really across the board. So there's a lot of needs there, which makes us feel good. Those categories are the ones that we actually used in the TeachKit that we created. So that really validates that we're on the right track in terms of some of the supports that we have in place. All right, so let's move on here and talk a little bit about what we have to share with you today. Thank you for providing that feedback. That kind of gives us a good set and gives us an opportunity to understand what we need to do and what we need to talk about. So I had a really great boss. It's the boss that brought me over to the dark side of administration. Lisa Gresseth, she now teaches, she's actually an educator in Camas School District here in Southwest Washington. And she introduced me to this idea of chopportunity, where you put the words challenge and opportunity together. So I thought that was a useful way for us to kind of look at these opportunities that we have in front of us. And so we'll start off with a challenge, and then we will end with an opportunity for all three of these sections. So the first one that we'd like to talk a little bit about is exploring this idea of instructional partnership. And as a teacher librarian, I spent a lot of time as an educator working alongside other teachers, whether that was in the classroom or coming to the library. And then for several years, I was an instructional coach. And really valued the opportunity of working alongside other educators and supporting them, and also learning from them in terms of what their needs are. So the challenge is how can I build as a school or district leader? How can I build or enhance instructional partnerships within my whatever setting I'm working in, whether it's my school or within a district? So let's go back to the chat here and kind of ask an open-ended question: is, as an educator, for your own sake, who or what supports you as an educator? So what keeps you going? What gives you those ideas? What keeps you from jumping off a cliff at the end of a long week? Let's take a look at the chat and see what supports you as an educator. So Sandy Sandy Crabtree's comments that professional learning, obviously things like this that we're doing today, great. One of the things that's kept me professionally alive during the pandemic has been Professional Learning Network. The colleagues that I have both locally as well as nationally, and just kind of checking in with them and having them provide new ideas and support. Yeah, coworkers. And one of the things, Kimberly, that was a real challenge in this last year is that was so distant. So you had those coworkers in place, but in many cases, because of the social distancing and the closure of the schools, it was really hard to have that shoulder to cry on. Yeah, collaborating with other teachers. Yeah, collegial discussions. Yes, Dan, I'm sorry. Great. Okay, so we know what collaboration looks and feels like, and we get a lot of benefit from it. There's a lot of things that kind of go into instructional partnership or educational partnership. On the left-hand side, these are kind of the informal things that we do. Is we have shoulders to cry on. We have buddies that we have on social media. We have former colleagues. That's something that I rely on a lot. It can be a vendor or a rep. I have several partners that I've bought things from, but they've also been just amazing thought partners in terms of giving me new ideas. I mentioned before the PLNs, professional learning networks, has been a really important part. But then also on the right-hand side, really we have kind of the people that are in place, the educators that are in place that can actually provide some instructional partnership or educational partnership. So teacher librarians, mentors, technology coaches, building leaders, and district leaders are all in that position to be able to do that. So there's kind of both informal and formal educational partnership that is in place. So the idea of coaching and instructional partnership is proven by research. So Joyce and Showers, way back 20 years ago, looked at data, and actually some of the data actually preceded that. So this is a long-standing body of data that shows that instructional coaching and instructional partnership has significant, like not even like small amounts of improvement, but a significant improvement when it comes to professional learning. And yet we don't do it a lot in schools. There's a lot of barriers that are in place. I'll be doing another session tomorrow that'll look at actually how to kind of turn that around. And I'll have at the end of the presentation a link, or at least the details of how to get to that. But this idea of coaching and instructional partnership is really a critical piece of the puzzle, but we don't often use it. And so today what we'd like to do is kind of introduce the idea of informal coaching and introducing some tools that might be used to help educators kind of move down the road in terms of their more powerful use of educational technology. So the big opportunity is how can I use instructional partnerships, informal instructional partnerships to support digital learning and teaching? So one of the challenges is, okay, so what do I want kids to do? Because in many cases, educators are used to being the sage on the stage and having kind of control of the situation. I realized that with the pandemic, that got flipped a little bit. But now as we go back to school, who and how are we going to design instruction to be able to support really some powerful teaching and learning? So the good news is we need to try to think about how do we redefine that student learning using educational technology. And the good news is that we have Washington Educational Technology Standards. These were adopted a few years ago, and I was actually part of a team, and I think Shauna was also part of the group that helped OSPI kind of redesign these educational technology standards. Thankfully, OSPI had the wisdom not to reinvent the wheel. And so they adopted the ISTE student standards, which had been adopted just a year or two previously, and they're outstanding. They're just really simple, really straightforward educational technology standards that can help educators kind of find a target for how to design instruction and design student tasks using educational technology in a variety of ways. And we're not going to belabor that. There is a link to on our organizer to finding that. But I want to just pull up just a couple examples of what the standards say. And I think you'll be able to see in the definitions kind of where the opportunities are to create more powerful opportunities for students. So empowered learner, I'm not going to read that because it's on the screen there and you can look for yourself. But really, this idea of having some agency and empowerment in using technology. And I noticed in the chat that there were some comments about that previously. Another one of the standards is innovative designer. So really turning the tables of having the educator as the primary designer of instruction to having students creating opportunities for learning on their own. Creative communicator, this is an important one, certainly in this 21st century. How do they represent themselves on online communities and how they can effectively communicate and collaborate with others. And then the other one, actually, those are just the three I pulled out. And there are a total of 7 of those. And there's a link on the organizer to the EdTech standards here in Washington State. You can also search for the ISTE student standards, which are essentially the same standards, because again, we didn't try to reinvent the wheel. So the opportunity is, given the fact that on the survey, there's a perception that about half of the respondents said that most educators have very little knowledge of these standards. This is a resource that might be useful for you. So as a school leader, or as a district leader, or instructional leader within your school, perhaps you could use these standards as a starting point for some discussions about doing some innovative student learning. All right, so here's what we all came for, is to share this great resource that Shauna and Hillary and Christy and a lot of teacher librarians across Washington State developed this last year, and it's the TeachKit. So the challenge is how can I build understanding and confidence in the use of digital tools and services in my school and in my district? We made a big jump this last year in terms of educator confidence with educational technology, but in some cases we need to keep pushing and kind of challenging them to do even more. So this is my very simple, primitive diagram to exemplify the point. So we have this opportunity of how can we do more with instructional partnership. We have this ongoing need for digital learning, and in the middle, da-da, we have the TeachKit, which I think is a kind of a glue to help build opportunities for stronger professional learning on the part of educators in your schools. So at this point, you're free to, I'm gonna kind of talk through some aspects of the TeachKit, and then I'm gonna give you an opportunity to go into the TeachKit, and I'm gonna give you a couple prompts, give you a chance to do some exploration. So essentially, the TeachKit was developed by teacher librarians in Washington State over this last year. And what we did was we curated the best professional learning resources for over 20 digital tools that are widely used in Washington State. So we essentially created a curated list for educators so that it would help them quickly get into the best resources if they want to use specific tools. So we identified about 24, 25 tools. And then we essentially created a one-stop shop. So we gave them access to first steps, next steps, how to use this in instructional design, how to manage, student manage and do all those sorts of things when you use that tool in the classroom. We did address differentiation and adaptation, some considerations that need to be made, and then some hybrid strategies as well. And again, the link is at the bottom. It's wla.org/teachkit, and that will take you right to the resource that we're talking about today. So the categories that we identified, and again, some of this is driven by what was happening last year. So we have virtual classroom, student interaction, and so on. You can see on the right-hand side. But we also identified resources on social emotional learning and how that connects to educational technology, information and resources on copyright and fair use, student safety and privacy, which is a big issue that we tend to overlook, so some resources there, and then of course access to the Washington EdTech standards. So what I'd like you to do now is I'm going to stop talking and let you kind of give it a spin. Find a tool. You can kind of navigate the site. It's relatively straightforward. Find a tool maybe that you know reasonably well, and see if there's a resource to help you find something new that you haven't, or a feature or something like that that's associated with that tool. Or if there's a tool that you're interested in, see if you can find something that you'd like to learn more about. And if there's questions, go ahead and post them into the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to give you another 5 to 7 minutes to kind of explore the TeachKit and see what's in there. And Shauna, thank you for putting the link in the chat. I appreciate that. Thanks. And if there's questions as you're navigating the TeachKit, go ahead and put them into the chat as well. Since Sean and I were part of the development of this tool, we'd be happy to try to answer them as best we can. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring you back and share a couple of more considerations and some resources for you. This resource, a couple of comments about the TeachKit, just so you know. It was an educator designed resource. So it was an idea that we kind of hatched as a collaborative, found some support from the Washington Library Association and from the Center for Strengthening the Teaching Profession. And it's really kind of an organic creation that educators built themselves. So this is not a vendor-sponsored site. We don't get any promotional considerations. It's also open educational resources. There's another session in this event that talks a little bit about the Washington Hub for open educational resources. And for those of you that aren't familiar with open educational resources, they are free resources that have defined use guidelines, and so they can be remixed and repurposed as educators may need them. And so it's really an important part. Washington has been doing some really good things around building content in open educational resources in that context. And so this is free. You're welcome to share it with educators, bring it to the attention of other colleagues that might find this useful. But it's, again, free to use. There's no strings attached to this resource. So I guess the kind of the last opportunity question is, is the TeachKit, and how could you use the TeachKit and this idea of instructional partnership? Are there teacher librarians? Are there instructional coaches? Are there school leaders that could leverage the TeachKit and or other resources to work more closely with other educators as they think about redesigning their instruction in the coming year? I think the TeachKit offers kind of a ready toolkit if those resources or if those tools are already being used in your school or setting. That's a starting place for those conversations to take place and for that instructional partnership to occur. But certainly you're not limited to TeachKit. TeachKit will get you started for those tools, but there's other opportunities for that as well. So as a former district leader, I would challenge you and think creatively about what are the ways in which you can kind of leverage teacher librarians, coaches, other folks that are kind of in a support or leadership role in the schools to be able to support that digital learning in your schools in the coming school year. So some next steps, some questions for you. They're not going to ask you to, fill in a exit ticket here, but these are some things to think about as we close out today. So questions for you, particularly now as you are leaders in your settings in the school or district. Who could benefit from the TeachKit? Are there specific educators, are there coaches that could benefit from having access to this and knowing about this? And then in what ways could you use the TeachKit as a tool for instructional partnership, where you have a teacher librarian using the TeachKit with an educator in the classroom, thinking about, well, it's like, how do we redesign things? How do we bring in the ed tech standards from Washington State to be able to use those as a kind of a design consideration for some powerful instruction in the classroom? What are some specific needs that could be addressed through the TeachKit and instructional partnership? Going back to the survey, there were a lot of tools in place, but there wasn't a lot of coaching supports maybe that need to be there. So maybe there's some needs that are either district strategic needs or perhaps school improvement plans. If there's some specific targets, is the TeachKit a tool for supporting that in some way? And then the last question is really, how can you get the ball rolling in your school or system? What are the next steps that you might be able to take to be able to operationalize this? And again, the ed tech standards have been there. They're free. They're there for the taking. And the TeachKit is also an open educational resource. So it's just right there. It's just a new tool that you can have in your arsenal as you work with other educators. So a couple of quick little promotions, and I apologize, the street cleaner is going by, so if there's some background noise, it's because our streets are being cleaned here in Vancouver, Washington. There's actually, Shauna is going to be leading, Shauna and Hillary will be looking at how you can use the TeachKit to redesign instruction to support digital learning. Shauna, I put you on the spot. Do you want to talk a little bit about that session, just a little bit of detail on that?
Sure. Yeah. During that session, Hillary and I will be guiding people to look a little bit more closely at those student standards and then sort of rethink how we're using some of the digital tools within the TeachKit with much more of a student-centered focus. I think for educators, a lot of us had a huge learning curve during the pandemic. But now the question is, well, how can we make sure students are really using technology in new, creative, innovative ways So we can kind of move beyond where we might have been just in a sort of survival mode, trying to keep instruction going. Now we can really kind of spread our wings and think about how we can help students gain some really intentional skills that will prepare them for careers, for college, to be just empowered users of technology.
Thanks, Shauna. And Shauna, I'm sorry, I just kind of dove in here. Was there something else that you wanted to share or add as we went along that I missed, or that you'd like to just call attention to?
Not necessarily explicitly. I can just share what we're planning to do at my school. We have a lot of, I think, digital leadership in isolated pockets throughout our building. Some teachers really worked closely with other staff members, and then some staff members last year were pretty isolated. So what we're hoping to do in August, before we begin the school year, is to really help utilize that leadership, have those teachers share the best practices from last year, and make sure that our entire staff is on the same page, and also thinking about how to be really deliberate in how we prepare students to use some of the key tools that we think are relevant and valid, whether we're in person, remote, hybrid, whatever the situation might be. But we really want to start that before the school year begins, and then unroll for students in the first couple of weeks of school. We're in a high school where there's lots of schedule changes, but have every department really dive into some key skills we want kids to develop so that they can be successful all year long. So that's something to think about, is how can we sort of capitalize on some of that thinking and processing time in August before we start instruction.
Great, thanks, Shauna. So the other session I just wanted to call attention to is that if you're looking for a way to build the capacity of educators to be instructional partners, a whole separate project that I worked on over this last year, thanks to some support from CSTEP, the Center for Strengthening the Teaching Profession, is a learning path called the LIFT framework, and it's really designed to help any educator, paraprofessionals, teacher librarians, instructional coaches, classroom teachers, or so on, kind of build their skill set around effectively working with other adults. And looking at learner variability, social emotional learning, and then integrating digital learning. And I'm really excited to say that we received a PESB grant. So we're going to be able to be offering to educators in this coming school year a small stipend to use the LIFT framework for their PGP, for their professional growth plan. So I don't have detailed information on that yet, but if you're interested in learning more about LIFT, the dates there are when I'll be sharing more about that framework, and that's a completely different project, but it does focus on this idea of instructional partnership. And I think with that, if there's people that came in late, our slide deck and resources can be seen at the bottom of a link to that is bit.ly/teach, kit, info, and that will take you to the slide deck and the resources that we put together for you. And that also includes information on this other session, this TeachKit session as well. Shauna, is there anything else before we close? We're going to finish just a little bit early and give people a chance to grab another cup of coffee. Anything else to add?
Well, it's been great to have people join us and to be thinking about this as we launch the new school year. And